Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk to you about something. International relations scholar John Mearsheimer has exposed Trump for lying, saying that his claim about ending the Russia-Ukraine war within 50 days is nothing but a pipe dream. In addition, Trump's malicious tariff actions are continuing. The U.S. imposed a 19% tariff on Indonesia, eyeing its copper. America's unilateral imposition of tariffs on foreign countries achieved results. U.S. Treasury Department data shows in June, U.S. tariff revenue hit a historic high, reaching $27.2 billion. The U.S. fiscal year ends September. By the end of June, the first 9 months of this fiscal year, U.S. customs revenue was impressive. Net income reached $108 billion, breaking the $100 billion mark for the first time. U.S. Treasury Secretary Pest said at a cabinet meeting that for the 2025 calendar year, from January to October, tariff revenue is expected to reach a high of $300 billion. Apart from hitting a wall with his extortionate tariffs on China and repeatedly backing down, Trump has gradually started to pull back on imposing tariffs on other countries. The latest move is the imposition of tariffs on Indonesia. On July 15th, Trump posted on his own social media platform, Truth Social, saying that he had just reached a major agreement with Indonesia that benefits all parties. In another post, he said that the agreement requires Indonesia not to impose any tariffs on products exported to the U.S., while the U.S. will impose a 19% tariff on products exported from Indonesia. He also said that as part of the agreement, Indonesia has committed to purchasing $15 billion worth of American energy products, $4 billion worth of American agricultural products, and 50 Boeing aircraft, most of which are the 777 model. Trump claimed that this agreement is a milestone, with Indonesia historically opening its entire market to the United States. He said that the U.S. can get everything without paying any tariffs, and that's how they are letting our products into Indonesia. This is unprecedented, and it might be the most crucial part of the deal. Later at the White House, Trump told reporters that he had heard Indonesia has many high-quality products, as well as valuable rare earths and various other minerals. One of the country's main features is its production of high-quality copper, and we will also be using that copper. In his typically plain-spoken style, he simply expressed great interest in Indonesia's copper resources. The U.S. Department of Commerce stated that Indonesia possesses abundant critical mineral resources, including cobalt, copper, bauxite, and nickel, which are essential raw materials for various technologies and clean energy products. According to a CNN report, this could mean that if Trump really follows through on his threat to impose a 50% tariff on all imported copper starting August 1st, Indonesian copper might face a lower tariff, or even be exempt from tariffs altogether. John Lang, Senior Director of Economic Security Policy at Geopolitical Risk Consultancy EPCO, told Nikkei Asia that this agreement with Indonesia will be like a canary in the coal mine, allowing other countries to anticipate the direction of future negotiations. John Lang, who was also a former White House official during Trump's first term, believes that Trump's focus on Indonesian copper may indicate that the role of critical minerals will be an important factor in reaching agreements. He said that this reflects the growing concerns in the United States about sourcing critical minerals and raw materials more broadly, and that agreements targeting these products could become models for the future. Last week, Trump said in a letter to the Indonesian president that starting August 1st, a 32% tariff would be imposed on Indonesian goods, but now it has been reduced to 19%. According to data from the U.S. Department of Commerce last year, Indonesia is the United States' 23rd largest trading partner. In 2024, bilateral trade between the U.S. and Indonesia was $38.2 billion, with the U.S. trade deficit at $17.9 billion. News outlets report the U.S.-Indonesia agreement is similar to the recent U.S.-Vietnam agreement announced by Trump. But in the past 2 weeks, the U.S. and Vietnam still haven't released the text of the agreement, and the Vietnamese government has yet to formally accept the key terms of the deal. Previously, Trump announced that the U.S. and Vietnam had agreed for the U.S. to unilaterally impose a 20% tariff on Vietnam, but later reports said that Vietnam originally thought it only needed to pay an 11% tariff, while Trump presented it as 20%. Earlier, this news outlet also quoted sources saying that the U.S.-Vietnam trade agreement was not as the U.S. unilaterally claimed, and that Vietnam was very likely played for a fool. Now, with the U.S. and Indonesia reaching a 19% tariff agreement, Vietnam's chances of lowering the tariff to 11% are extremely slim. It can be summed up like this. First, the United States wants to unilaterally impose a 19% to 20% tariff on countries with which it has a trade deficit. This intention is very clear, and these small and medium-sized countries have very little leverage when negotiating with the U.S. Second, the U.S. is deeply anxious about critical minerals and is eager to see a supply chain independent of China, but realistically, it would take at least 7 to 10 years to make that happen. On the contrary, China is likely to establish a chip supply chain independent of the U.S. and the West even faster. Third, U.S. Commerce Secretary Raimondo stated regarding the agreement between the U.S. and Indonesia that the U.S. will impose zero tariffs on future exports from Indonesia, which will reverse the previous asymmetrical situation. This move is expected to bring industries back to the U.S., injecting vitality into American farmers, ranchers, fishermen, and various sectors. After hearing what he said, from another perspective, Indonesia's agriculture will face even greater competition from American products, which could become a destabilizing factor within Indonesia itself. Unlike China, Indonesia doesn't have the leverage to impose counter tariffs on American products. In addition, on July 14th, Trump announced a major statement regarding the Russia-Ukraine issue. Unlike his optimistic attitude at the beginning of his term, he threatened at the White House that if Russia and Ukraine fail to reach a peace agreement within 50 days, he will impose a 100% tariff on Russia and implement secondary sanctions. According to Mainland Observer Network, John Mearsheimer, a political science professor at the University of Chicago, along with retired U.S. official Daniel, in a podcast interview on July 14th, Davis pointed out that Trump is deluding himself if he thinks he can persuade Putin to change the terms of the peace talks. However, the actual situation on the battlefield shows that the possibility of reaching a settlement through negotiations at this stage is extremely slim. Ukraine should have seized the opportunity to reach a ceasefire agreement, but its leadership has invested too much in sunk costs to admit defeat or accept a ceasefire. Now, the Russia-Ukraine conflict will not end within 50 days. In the end, Russia will win this war, and after that, the United States and the West will face endless troubles. A host, retired U.S. military officer David, said that after watching the video of Trump speaking at the White House, he himself was almost at a loss for words. He asked Mearsheimer whether Trump was deceived by someone when he said those things. Mearsheimer responded by saying that Trump wasn't deceived by anyone, Trump was just fooling himself there. Putin did not deceive Trump. Putin's stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict has always been consistent and clear, especially when he was talking with Trump. Mearsheimer said, "You don't have to agree with Putin's position or the terms he set for negotiations, but from the very beginning, Putin was very clear about all of this. The mistake Trump made was fooling himself into thinking he could persuade Putin to change the terms for negotiations. He had multiple conversations with Trump and claimed that these talks were friendly and pleasant. But who really cares whether Trump's conversations with Putin were friendly and pleasant?" Mearsheimer believes the key issue is how Trump actually views the terms set by Putin. Would he accept them or not? He suspects that Putin has already made Russia's bottom line clear to Trump, but Trump doesn't seem to understand this. That's why this farce has dragged on for months. This is the situation we're facing now. Trump is just fooling himself over there. Host Davies pressed further, asking, since Putin has never changed the terms he offered, what makes Trump think the two sides should have been able to reach a deal? Mearsheimer said that Trump has never actually mentioned the specifics of that deal. They also said that during the previous 4 calls between the US and Russian leaders, they were close to reaching an agreement each time. So tell me, what exactly does Trump think the agreement that should have been reached was? Of course Trump won't tell us, because he's just bragging. On the issue of a ceasefire, the Russian side has repeatedly made it clear that they will not accept a simple ceasefire agreement. Even so, Trump and his aides, as well as various European countries and the Ukrainian side, are still pushing for a short-term ceasefire agreement. We believe these are completely unacceptable. Do these people, including Trump, really not understand that repeatedly calling for a ceasefire is just a waste of time? What's more, anyone with a bit of common sense knows that it would be utterly foolish for Russia to accept a short-term ceasefire at this point. If you're winning victory after victory on the battlefield while your enemy is falling apart, why would you agree to a short-term ceasefire? That would undoubtedly give your opponent a chance to catch their breath, giving them time to regroup, resupply, and prepare for another counterattack. If you've already forced your opponent into retreat, you should press the advantage and keep pursuing them. This is exactly the strategy Russia is adopting right now. Going back to his earlier point, Russia has made it clear that it won't do that, and in fact, that's exactly what's happening. There's really nothing more to say. Davis then asked, how will Russia respond to Trump's final ultimatum? That so-called ultimatum being, ceasefire within 50 days, or else Russia will face sanctions. He guessed that Russia's reaction would be something like, is that the best wreck you've got? 50 days from now, the situation will be exactly the same as it is now. Nothing will have changed. He asked Mearsheimer if he thought the Kremlin would respond this way. Mearsheimer said, I think Russia will just keep doing what they're supposed to do, keep advancing on the battlefield and securing victory. He believes that Russia is well aware that the chances of reaching a settlement through negotiations right now are extremely slim, unless Trump makes a complete 180-degree shift in his position. So, from Russia's perspective, they should just keep advancing and try to end the conflict through war as soon as possible. After listening to Mearsheimer's interview, my own views are actually quite similar. I think Trump is just bragging right now. If you take Trump's stance on the Russia-Ukraine issue seriously, you're just setting yourself up to lose.